Hello, and thank you for joining us. We hope that you've been following along all week for investing tips and strategies from our panel of experts. In today's segment, Don't Get Swing, Fraud Prevention Tips, we'll give you the 411 on what you should be looking for to avoid becoming a victim and safeguard your investments. Taking us on this journey is Mrs. Tishrea Johnson, Investment Advisor at RF Bank and Trust, and Holland Grant, COO of the Bahamas International Stock Exchange. Lady, gentlemen, welcome today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's dive right in. Don't get swing. What is investment fraud?
Well, to put it plainly, investment fraud is any deceptive practices that someone would come to you with to try to get you to invest in things that aren't legitimate or things, that are even illegal, So basically the old adage, if anything sounds too good to be true, it usually is. So anything along those lines.
Right. So one of the most common things I think of when I think of investment fraud are misrepresentation of risk. So a foundational principle of finance is risk equals return. The amount of risk for something should determine the return on it. So when someone comes to you and says they guarantee you 100% investment, what they're truly telling you is that there's a significantly high or commensurate high level of risk. But what a lot of investment fraud is misrepresenting that risk and pretending like it's low when it's in fact incredibly high.
What are some of the signs that I could look for as a not savvy investor? What are some of the signals red flags, as the young people say, that I could see when being presented with these fraudulent schemes?
Well, Holland already touched on something. He was saying, if someone tells you, you're going to get this incredible return, but they don't mention any risk or they say it's low risk, that's more than a red flag. It's impossible unless it's illegal. So that's something to look for. Another thing to look for is precious selling. Person saying you have to buy now, aggressive, you have to close now. Why do I have to close right now? What is it that you don't want me to find out later? And a lot of things with scams too, you have to build that trust with someone. That is what makes it successful. This person causes you to trust them. So a lot of times you'll have things like family members or friends, even them unknowingly, mind you, coming to get you to join certain things. And, that is something that you could, probably say, hey, let me think about this, So there's various signs that would cause me, even, as an individual to say, hey, maybe something isn't right here.
Okay. Now, I know family members come to me all the time. Listen, this one is it, right? This one is it. We're going to win big with this one, right? Mommy going to be straight. Now, how do I verify when they present me this amazing opportunity? Is there anyone I could call or anywhere I could go to verify that this opportunity is in fact legitimate?
Yeah. So one of the things I think about, any positive life decision starts with good habits. So the habits with investing are built on education. Building up that knowledge foundation helps you to be a more successful investor. So once you've built up that knowledge education or that knowledge foundation, then you supplement it by looking at specific things. You start from the general principle, such as risk equals return, time value of money, and then you build up to the specifics. Why is this investment good? One thing I like to say is, when you get that WhatsApp that says you won the Samsung lottery, it's easy for people to say immediately that that's fake. And interestingly, I got one today, and I actually invited him to join us. He blocked me for some reason.
Oh, wow.
I don't know why. But when you get approached by a guy in a suit and tie who says he's from Harvard University, you should object him to that same level of healthy skepticism until you can prove his bona fides. Is he licensed? Is this a licensed investment? What all due diligence can you do on this person and this investment to ensure that it's legitimate?
I've heard, maybe not so recently, but the loom was a big thing a few years back, and now I'm hearing about divine gifting, and then we've always heard about pyramid schemes. Walk me through, what are these things? Because these things have been around forever, but they keep reinventing themselves, right, with new names. So define for me, what is a pyramid scheme? Let's start there.
Okay, so I'm really glad that you pointed out that, they keep reinventing it. So even though the name may change, the look may change, at the bottom of it, there are certain things that remain the same. So in a pyramid scheme, you have to invite family members, you have to invite friends to join in order for you to make money. Even though they may say, oh, we're selling a product, you don't really make money from selling that product. You make money from bringing people in. The bad thing about a pyramid scheme is that eventually, just like the pyramid's shape, it gets smaller and smaller. The people at the bottom, if you get in early, yeah, you make a lot of money. But if you get in later, where most persons get in, you really don't make any money from that pyramid scheme. Okay, and so you end up with a loss. You put a lot of money in here. You drag family members and friends in here. They're probably not talking to you anymore at this point. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think you covered it pretty well, excellently. With any of these, the person at the beginning ends up doing well, the people after, it's like building something on a foundation of sand. Eventually it has to collapse, and that's what happens with every pyramid scheme, is it eventually collapses.
Without calling names, what's the most common fraudulent scheme about now?
I think you do see a lot of those Ponzi pyramid schemes, and those tend to be one of the most common. A lot of Bahamians have invested in other types of financial instruments through unregulated or unlicensed websites. They've put money into them. I've had family members say, well, can't I make a lot of money doing this? And I always tell them, one, confirm that's regulated. And if it's regulated, even if it's high risk, I don't discourage it. But one, you want to make sure you have a legal level of recourse and you're protected in some way from deceptive and dishonest practices.
But I still want to touch on the different types, because persons may not know. Yes. For example, the advance fee scheme. Person comes to you and says, okay, let's say you were trying to get a loan, $10,000 loan, you couldn't get it for whatever reason. Person say, give me $1,000 and I'll make sure that you get this $10,000 loan approved. Of course, you never get this loan approved. Okay, then you have the Ponzi scheme. You mentioned the looming. So I think that's a perfect example of a Ponzi scheme. So like I said, the name changes, but it's the same. Somebody has to bring in money in order for you to get your payment. So I just wanted to make sure people knew what these things were, even though it has a different name. When you see these advance fees, you have to pay up front. When you see somebody has to come in and bring money, then that's another red flag. Something's going on.
Something's going on. What should we do when presented with these fraudulent schemes and opportunities?
Research. That should be your first step. Try to figure out everything, figure out the principles of the scheme. Someone once said to me, I can understand anything if I draw it out. Draw out the cash flows. See if you understand the cash flows. How does this investment make money? If you can't figure out how something makes money, one of the most famous examples was Enron back in the day. Their competitors looked at them and they said, well, we're all in the same business. There's no way they could be making this much money. They smelt a rat right away. But that's based off research. So that's one of the things I would say. Tish?
Yeah, and I would say everyone really does have that trusted family member or friend. Because I've had many customers come to me, they'll sit and they'll talk with me and they feel like, she knows what she's saying. But they gather up all their papers and they say, you know what? I have a son who's in this business, or I have an aunt who's in this business. I'm going to see what they say about it. So you do have someone who you know is knowledgeable and who you trust to some degree. So even after your research, or if you feel like your research is incompetent enough, I would say reach out to that person. Get a feel of it from them. The main thing is, before you put your money in, exhaust all avenues of gaining knowledge and feel as comfortable as you can. Even if it's a legitimate investment and you really don't understand what you're putting your money into, I wouldn't advise you to do it. You should have, like you said, a basic understanding of what you're doing.
Where do I find research? Because most times the person presenting the opportunity is where we get the depth and the breadth of the information, right? What websites or other resources in the local context could be used to get information on these schemes?
So you can start, for purposes of seeing if it's regulated, you can go to the Securities Commission of the Bahamas' website, www.scb.gov.bs. And that would show you all of their licensed entities.
Okay.
So that's a source for local regulatory status. Figuring out if the business even makes sense starts with that foundational investor education knowledge, though. And that, sites like Investopedia are really very good at helping you with.
And you need to know who's managing your money.
Okay.
Who is the CEO? Who are the persons on the board? Who are the persons when I give my money over to this company, who is managing it? So, if it's someone who is a reputable person who's been in banking for a number of years, someone known in the community, you probably would lean more towards that type of investment. So, you need to know who is managing your money.
I did all my research, but I still get swing. Is there any help, any hope for me?
It depends. It truly depends. So legal recourse can be through contract law, through the Securities Commission, making a report through their enforcement division. One of the challenges frequently, depending on the type of investment, is by the time fraud is discovered, typically the proceeds of the crime have been dispersed. So let's go to the Bernie Madoff case, one of the most notorious Ponzi schemes of the last 20 years. By the time people discovered Mr. Madoff's fraud, it was too late for many of the investors to do anything because those proceeds have been paid out to earlier investors because it was a Ponzi scheme.
Right.
So the people at the top had already received what they thought were legal proceeds and in many instances paid that. And you can't, but because they were actually victims as well, just not victims that lost, you can't grab that money back. So a lot of it depends on timing of discovering the fraud and the ability of you to be able to go after those proceeds of the crime.
Understood. Final words, final advice to Bahamians as they seek to, especially in these times, make that extra buck.
My final words, I guess, as it relates to investment fraud, you have to put in the work. You can't just allow someone to come in and say, hey, this is a great investment, this is a great deal, I'm going to get you some money, and then, hey, I need it because things tough. No, you have to put in the work and the time of making sure what you're doing makes sense. Like you said, at the end of the day, you can research, and then you still, end up at the wrong end of the deal. But at least you would have known you did your best in making sure it was legitimate. So that is what I would say. You have to put in the work behind it and make sure what you're doing makes sense.
Holland?
Education. You build from a foundation. If you don't start from a strong foundation, you can't expect a good result. So that begins with gathering that strong understanding of the basics of investing, and then you're able to apply it to more specialized fields.
Thank you for watching. We hope you were able to gain some valuable insights from our guests. Don't forget to post your questions in the comments and join us right here this Friday to get them answered. For the full list of this week's activities, visit rfgroup.com/investwell, where you can also set up an appointment with an RF investment specialist if you're ready to dive into investing. Follow us on social media using the handles @RF Bank Trust and @BISX Exchange to stay up to date on everything that's happening. I'm Jackie Cleare. I trust you'll enjoy the rest of your day.